Hello again. A lot of you might be coming up to your first sort of big event, or you might have done a few big events already, and might be wondering, well, how do I recover after the event? And if you've got several long rides or runs, and several ultra events this year, or several big events this year, then how do you transition from one to the other? How long does it take to recover from one event? And then start building up to the next one. Well, of course, like most things in sports, you've heard me say it many times, probably it depends. It depends on your background, how used to the type of event you've just done you are, how much time you can devote to proper, good recovery time, or have you got to rush straight back to work? Do you have a lot of travel associated with your work? All these factors come into how quickly you can recover and start preparing for your next event. And if it's actually a main event of the season, then you can take as long as you want, and it's certainly worth taking a long time to get a good, proper recovery if you've got a long time between the event you've just done or the event you're just about to do and the next event that's coming up. If you've been really pushed to your limits, then you need probably a good few weeks, and for things like really big events like Jenny's Around the World ride, probably took her a year to become, not necessarily physically recovered, but mentally recovered from the effort of it all. And even for shorter events, like I coached Karen Dark to Paralympic gold in Rio a few years ago, and it probably took her about a year to get mentally recovered from it, not because of the trauma of the event, because it was only a 20-minute time trial, but because of all the hard work that went into the training. And to some extent, this is a mental recovery as well as a physical recovery. If you've got several events in quick succession, it's better to plan all the events together, like you can see on our PBP planner, where the series comes, the 200, 300, 400 and 600 come fairly close together. You build fitness before the start of the series, and then you basically recover, get ready for the next one, recover and get ready for the next one. So you might actually be accumulating fatigue throughout the series, or you might be building fitness. It all depends how it works for you, and it can work differently for you each time you do it. Sometimes things might all click together and your last event's the best event, and other times things might not click, or you might have a really hard event in the middle, and then your last event's a struggle to get through. So it's not always the same, even for the same person. So irrespective of this, I think it's worth having a rough plan so that you follow a similar sort of protocol each time, and have it planned out. If you've got a series of events close together, then obviously you need to plan it that way. And if you've got one event with maybe 4 to 6 weeks, probably 6 weeks before the next one, then you can adopt a slightly different approach and look at the events as individual events rather than blocking them together, so you can have a bit of downtime and then build back up. I tend to do things in a similar way. So what I typically plan is a week of unstructured, what I call an unstructured week, whereby you don't have anything planned, and maybe some people would just not do anything during that week, or just go for a few short walks. Particularly if you're doing a bike event and you've got saddle sores or you've got bruising, you might not really want to be sat on a bike, so doing some alternative type of exercise can be useful. So I have this unstructured week, and the idea is that as you start, if you feel like riding the bike or feel like going for a run or something, then do it. And if you don't feel like it, then don't do it. For longer events, like a bikepacking event or a 600 for instance, or perhaps even a 400 if you're not used to it, then I might have a couple of unstructured weeks and just wait until you feel like riding again. Because your mind, your sort of intuition can be quite helpful. And if you're still mentally fatigued, you probably don't feel like doing anything. And as a consequence, it's sometimes a good idea not to do anything. But once you feel like riding, or if you've had 2 weeks, it's probably worth having a test, because sometimes actually doing something makes you feel like doing it. And just go for an easy ride, an easy run, and see how that feels. And then if that feels okay, then maybe have a rest day and do it again, or ride again the next day and see how you feel, so you can start building up. And then the following week you start putting something in the plan. So you plan to ride, maybe you start with 20 or 30 minutes, if that goes okay, 30 or 40 minutes. And then you can start having 30 to 40 minutes a day, 2 days in a row, rest day, 30 to 40 minutes a day, rest day, get to the weekend, do an hour or 2 hours, and if that feels good, then you're sort of back into building up a training volume. And during all this process, it's worth checking your heart rate variability or your resting heart rate in the morning, and seeing how that tracks, because it can be quite a good indicator. Certainly for myself, even if I do a long ride, maybe 6 or 7 hours, then my HRV the following day, or my overnight average HRV is quite depressed, and it bounces back quite quickly. But it does show that there's some hard number that you can use to keep an eye on things as well, to reinforce how you're feeling. What normally happens is you start to feel better in easy sort of endurance rides and runs, sort of low intensity stuff, and you think, oh, I'm back to normal now. And at that point, it's worth trying a few higher intensity efforts. So you come to a hill, like run hard up a hill or ride hard up a hill, or just increase the intensity. And what you'll find is that it doesn't feel good. You're still feeling tired, and it's the higher intensity side that gives you an indication of how well recovered you are. And therefore that's the next phase. So once you're feeling good in your endurance zones, your zones 1 and your zone 2 if you're using a 5-zone model, then start trying something a bit faster, a bit harder. If that seems to be not too bad, or if you feel you need something more structured, plan some easy-ish interval sessions. So that's sort of, in your tempo zone, for instance, you might do the type of interval session that you would do a threshold or VO2 max session, but do it at tempo effort and see how that feels, and see how your heart rate responds. So as you increase intensity, your heart rate should go up fairly quickly, and it should recover fairly quickly. And if you're still carrying some fatigue, it might go up very slowly, or it might not go up very much, and your perceived exertion might also be quite high for that level of intensity. And it's worth having a plan for this, might be over 3 or 4 weeks or more, so that you've got this sort of progression, but bear in mind that you need to keep it flexible, because you don't really know how quickly you're going to recover. And the best way to do that might be, like, if a week doesn't go particularly well, if you've planned a week with a say one interval session and that doesn't work out, then just repeat the week or step back a week. So you can use the same standard weeks that you always use, and if you always do the same thing, every event that you do, you get these benchmarks. So you think, oh, usually when I get to this stage, or usually when I can do 6 by 10 minutes at the tempo or sweet spot, then I'm back in action again. Then you know, and you've got something that's a standardised way of working, and that can be extremely useful. Then you've got something like the series. You're saying you're doing an audax series, and some of the events are close together. You won't expect to get back to full training between the events. You can see on our planner here that you've got a 200 and then 3 weeks recovery, and 300 3 weeks recovery, and 400 3 weeks, and then 4 weeks before the 600. Well, the idea is that you've built all your fitness before you get into that series, and as a consequence, what you're doing between the events is making sure you're fully recovered. You'll then carry the fitness from the event, the endurance gains that you've made during the events, and then you just ride the next event. So what the idea is that you're maintaining your fitness, building a bit of endurance by doing the events, and not trying to get any faster during the events. You're just using the your FTP that you've got, the basic fitness that you've got as you go through, recover, do the next one, recover. It's like you're seeing it as one big event, really. The other thing that's important to note is that fatigue can often be quite delayed. So often after an event, assuming you've not got really serious saddle sores or bruising, you can actually feel reasonably good. And then a week later you feel tired. So that's why I had this unstructured week in. That's one of the reasons I have the unstructured week, is because it leaves a bit of freedom, and we can just observe things about how you're feeling, and then start building in with a bit of structure after the unstructured week or 2 weeks. So that's it. In summary, 1 week unstructured or 2 weeks unstructured, 1 week or 2 weeks basic endurance zones. Once that feels okay, start trying something a little bit harder. If that feels okay, you can drift back into normal training. If it doesn't feel okay, then you need to extend the period of recovery. But don't try and push yourself back into training because that's usually counterproductive. I hope that helps. Good luck with your events. If you want to download the planning spreadsheet tool, I'll add a link in the description. And if I can help in any way, formally or informally, get in touch. And I love to help people, and I love to coach people. If you want to work one-to-one, that's fantastic. We've got a group plan that works really well and is very affordable, so maybe you'd like to check that out. Okay, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.